Councilmember Marvin Moore and pledged by Sonny Nason.
Let's bow our heads. Dear Heavenly Father, we'd just like to thank you, Father, for being God and God all by yourself. We pray for strength, Father. We pray for wisdom, knowledge, and understanding. Father, we pray that you would guide our city, Father, in the direction that it needs to be guided. These and other blessings in your Son, Jesus' name. Amen.
Amen.
Attention, salute, pledge. I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Good evening. I wish to welcome you to this meeting of the Mayor and the Board of Aldermen. Ms. Goldman, roll call, please, to determine the quorum.
Mr. Moore?
Present.
Mr. Johnson?
Present.
Mr. Nason?
Here.
Mr. Armstrong?
Here.
Mr. Locke?
Here.
All present, Mayor.
Thank you, Ms. Goldman. This is the beginning of our fiscal year 2010-11. And I want to thank everyone for your support in getting this administration through our first year. I only have a few announcements because we do have some formal presentations this evening, so I won't take a lot of your time to allow more time for the presentations. I wish to thank all of the departments for working together for the celebration of Juneteenth and 4th of July. We had some committee members working for the Juneteenth that went that extra mile, and I certainly want to express my appreciation to you for the labor that you put forth in planning the Juneteenth activities. Mr. McKee, if you would join me at the podium, because I know that you work with the committees a lot, and I will step down and join you. And as I call your names, please receive your certificate of appreciation. Well, we have a lot of them, and that's good. Ms. Vicki Lenore. On behalf of the City of Bastrop and this council, I wish to express my appreciation to you for the work that you did with the Juneteenth Planning Committee. You're so welcome. Lisa Chafford, City Marshal. We wish to thank you also. Thank you. Milton Grimes, Deputy Marshal. Thank you for your time spent in the park and planning. Alan Tansey, Recreation Director. Thank you, Mr. Tansey. Evelyn Lenore, one of our very own city employees. Thank you, Ms. Lenore. Leslie Smith, another one of our very own. Thank you.
Mayor, if I may?
Sure.
Honestly, they did work very hard and very long hours. I didn't know they could work that hard.
Thank you so much for your commitment to public service. I would like to thank the Public Works Department for all of the hard work. We now have our 2 bridges open. Martin Luther King and Donaldson bridges are now open. Chief Montgomery and Training Officer Brown, I want to thank you for all of the preparation in terms of the fire rating. We are now waiting for the outcome, but we know that you worked very, very hard in preparing for that on June 29th. I have tasked both chiefs now with helping us to be proactive in terms of the criminal activities that have been occurring around town. We realize that the police department alone cannot bear the burden because the likelihood of a police officer being on site when a crime occurs is highly unlikely. So we're going to have to rely on you as citizens to help us with pointing out something that's different in your neighborhood. So we're going to have a seminar here at the City Hall, and I've asked each council member to refer some names from your neighborhoods of people who are either retired or not working, who like to peruse the neighborhood and are likely to see something unusual. We certainly don't want citizens taking the law into their own hands, but do help us become more vigilant so that we can solve crimes and make our neighborhoods safer. This is our first meeting since the announcement of the IP closure. In fact, it was about 2.5 weeks ago that announcement came. And I go on record in saying this, I was very, very disappointed with the information that was put out. And I did call them and let them know that I was in disagreement with the fact that they made a decision that they felt was in the best interest of the community. I do not argue that they didn't make a decision of what they felt was in the best interest of their company, but typically when companies have been in a location for a number of years, and in this case, over 80 years, assets become an issue once they depart. But I do want you to know that I have initiated communication with the proper authorities that can work with us as we work through this process. Please try to remain calm. There are a lot of confidentiality statements in place, which has really been a barrier for me to penetrate these surfaces as everyone has sworn off on secrecy. But I think this community deserves more than that, and I will be fighting for that. And I ask that you just bear with us as we get through the process. That concludes my announcements, but I do want to acknowledge the hard work that has occurred in the legislative session. And at this time, I'm going to ask Senator Mike Walsworth to come and give us an update. And I would like to ask that let's receive him with a round of applause because we do appreciate the hard work.
Well, I will say it's glad to be home. I mean, those 4 months were tough times, and I think probably the state of Louisiana is a lot like Bastrop. We're still struggling with our finances, and good news is we got through with it before we had to have any kind of special session. The bad part is that next year's finances doesn't look very good at all. We spent some one-time monies this time just to sort of limp along. State of Louisiana is, I was over at the Civic Center in Monroe yesterday to see the Lombardi Trophy, and I think we were all happy about the Saints and really had us on a real positive note in February, and all of a sudden, 2 months later, we have the BP oil spill, and that is one of those that just seems to be, and my colleague is now here, it has affected us mentally as well as physically, and we just, every day that you see that oil coming out is just really impacting. Real quickly, I'll give you some notes. Corporate income tax for this state in the last fiscal year that just ended last week was down 75% from the year before. We lost about $500 million just on income tax. On sales tax. state sales tax. So we are really struggling with our finances. We've gone from about $12 billion in the state general fund side to almost $7.7 billion over the last 3 years. So it's just been a rocket slide downward. We're using a little over $1 billion in one-time money from the feds that we're going to have to figure out where to either cut those or figure out how to do with a lot less, but still keep the kind of services that we have. That's the outlook for next year. I'm on finance, so we'll continue to fight that struggle. We did meet with early on before the session. My colleague, Representative Little, and I met with the administration and the mayor and trying to make sure that we gave you some tools in this last legislative session. Sam ran with the bill. We finished it up over on the Senate side, and it basically is the same bill that we started out with to allow you to do some things locally that in your time of need. And I think it's a pretty good bill that's out there. So gives you some opportunities and some tools to make your job a little bit easier. We brought in some monies. I think Sam and I went out just when we got back a couple of weeks ago. We went out and saw the activity center, and we're looking forward to that being completed. We like it that over the last couple of weeks we've had some rain at least, so I think it's hopefully, and as we know, we're still an ag community, and we're looking forward to hopefully having somewhere in between maybe a little bit more rain, but not quite as much as we had last year. If you'll remember, July started probably a 4-month period that we may have had rain every day, so we don't really want to go that much. So caution your prayers a little bit. We started praying for rain last year and it never ended. So that's pretty much. We'll answer any questions you got. I'm going to bring Sam up and let him give you your take. But that's sort of an overview of the legislature, and we're, again, glad to be home. Sam.
I apologize for being late, but during the session, my wife's truck was broken into, and we're still having problems from that. So it was back in the shop again today. One of the first questions that I get is from most people. They remember the first day or two of the session, and they said, did you get any reprisal from the speaker for voting against him for the new pro tem? Definitely not. Definitely not. I told the speaker how I was going to vote, how I had to vote, and how I felt I had to vote for the man from Northeast Louisiana, and I did that. And there was no reprisal to me whatsoever on that. I appreciate Mr. Tucker. He has organized the House and got it in a business-like fashion, moving through bills. And he knew, he tried to move me off of Natural Resources Committee last year, and I asked him not to. He wanted to put me on the Insurance Committee. I asked him, please don't do me that way. And he said the subject was over. And so he could have moved me this year, and knowing that that was not what I wanted to do. It was a good session. Like I say, I apologize for being here. I know that y'all being members of the LMA, you know the bills that pertaining to city governments and the ones that y'all wanted killed. I think it was a good session for municipal governments. It was a good session for rural areas. We had bills pertaining to agriculture, which Morehouse Parish, I always love to say, is the largest agricultural parish in the state, and we had some good bills pertaining to agriculture and other things in the rural areas. The water issues, which from now on, the rest of our lives, we will be working with. While the session was on, Mike and I did Madam Mayor knows this because she was down with the chamber. We had contacts with several General Motors dealers trying to get someone interested to come to Bastrop. One of them being Jerry Lane in Baton Rouge. And Eric, actually, his son, runs it now. And he said our population did not have enough to bring them. We also had contacts with Spring Hill Motors over in Spring Hill, Louisiana. I thought they might want to branch out a little bit, but they said under the current economic situation, they were not interested. Now, maybe we need to do some other looking in other areas. And now that we've got a little more time, maybe we can do that. With that, and I believe I'll stop and we'll step back and try to answer any questions.
Do you have any questions for our legislative delegation?
I will real quickly point out, the $10 million that we have historically had in LGAP, which is for local and rural parishes, has been put back in the budget this year again. So that is pretty good for local governments and rural parishes. So the LGAP money is in there again this year. So we had to, the rural areas had to fight very hard for that, but along with the governor, we got that back in the, and we appreciate our Representative Fann and his role in trying to make sure that that stayed in there. So it did stay in. So that's a good news for the local government.
If you'll remain there.
Yeah. What's she giving out to? Oh.
On behalf of the city of Bastrop and this council, I wish to express my appreciation.
Thank you. Yes, ma'am.
This is a job where you are thanked, and I'll give you an attaboy.
Thank you, man.
Yes, ma'am.
If you have no questions for our legislative delegation, you do? Okay, Mr. Armstrong?
209,
Go ahead.
I think, Mike,
Sir?
Bill 209.
You're going to have to refresh my memory a little.
Providing that the director, the deputy director, and all employees of the governor office of Homeland Security and Emergency Readiness shall be unclassified service of the state civil service.
Well, since I'm since I'm Homeland Security, that is the previous, that's where we were before Katrina, when we started Homeland Security somehow. It was not the intention of the legislature to put them in civil service, but according to civil service, they ruled that they were civil service employees. In a time of emergency, as we all know, you have to do extraordinary things with the staff that you have. Civil service, because of their rules and regulations, does not allow you to do some of those extraordinary things that you have to do. So that's why we did that bill to bring us back in a time of emergency, such as what we have right now with BP and the oil spill. You overtime, those kind of things, and yeah, civil service says, here's your job description, and you can't do anything else but that. Mm-hmm. But unclassified has a larger range of that you can have more ability of working your employees, and that's where we were before when it was called the military department. When we made those changes, basically post-Katrina, that somehow, according to a ruling of civil service, the legislature messed up, and we corrected that in that session.
Okay.
Is that Bodie's?
Thank you for that question, Mr. Armstrong. Senator, Representative, we do appreciate everything that you did for us in the legislative session. And with that being said, I'm going to ask Mr. Lawrence if he would address how we have benefited. We are operating in a charter that's over 50 years old, so we had to reposition ourselves in some areas. Mr. Lawrence.
Yes, ma'am, and I'll just briefly, our charter is 53 years old, and since 1957, even the Louisiana Constitution has been updated. And so these changes that the two of you helped to shepherd through the legislature put us on par with the current state constitution, with most other municipalities throughout the state, and it makes it a lot easier for us to acquire property, to convey ownership of property, and it even touches upon the powers of the city court to be able to have powers that are similar to other courts throughout the state. So you brought us into the 21st century by helping us to amend this 53-year-old document. I tell you, I really appreciate it as a lawyer, understanding, you know, what's at stake and knowing how tough that it was. So I appreciate it.
Real quickly, and Doug, I just want to thank you. You were very helpful. I think we had several conversations during the session, and to be able to get that response very quickly back and forth in our conversations, I really do appreciate that help. And
Appreciate it.
if you can answer those questions quickly and that your colleagues may have, it just makes that bill go a lot easier, and that's what it did. So thank you specifically for your help during this thing.
Appreciate it.
Thank you, gentlemen. We appreciate your service to public service. Item number 5. At this time, I will entertain a motion to approve the minutes from the June 10th and June 15, 2010 meetings.
Make a motion.
We have a
Second that
motion
motion.
and second. Are there any questions? Discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Item number 6, Finance Committee Report Resolution 101339, Bills and Claims for the month of June 2010. Mr. Armstrong.
I'd like to make a motion.
A motion by Mr. Armstrong,
Second.
second by Mr. Locke. Are there any questions? Discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Are we prepared for, you had a presentation, Tom and Emily. I present to you, and while they're preparing, I also would like to ask Attorney Charles Herring to come. You're going to see an updated report on the historic school project. Also, we have with us Vicki Carpenter. You're with the Historic Committee. Mark Rainwater. Thank you for coming. And Attorney Charles Herring, would you stand up? We welcome Attorney Herring to this project. He will be working with us through the duration of this project. One of our local attorneys. Thank you, Attorney Herring. Okay, Emily, Tom, we welcome you to Bastrop again, and we're ready for your presentation.
Hello. I believe this is the first time I've been to the City Council here in Bastrop, so it's my pleasure. I'm Tom Crumley. I live in New Orleans. I have been coming up to Bastrop since July of 2002, working slower than anybody would have guessed, trying to redevelop the former Bastrop High School. With me is Emily Ostu. I'm going to let Emily make the presentation, the PowerPoint presentation, and give you an update where we are. But just thought I'd take the opportunity to thank Vicki Carpenter, who's been the longest standing volunteer or representative in Bastrop, prompting me to continue to push this, and likewise Mark Rainwater on the private volunteer side. They've been instrumental in everything we've done so far. With that, I'll pass it over to Emily, who is our project manager on the project, and she'll go over the presentation, and then we're happy to answer any questions you all may have.
Hi, I'm Emily Ostu with Woodward Interests. Tom's been working on this project for about 7 years, and since I started working with Tom, one of the first things I started working on was the Bastrop High School project. So I'm just as excited as he is, and all of you are, to see it moving forward. And I'm happy to report that we're planning on going to a financial closing and starting construction in August of this year. So we're very, very excited for that. Sorry. There we go. Thank you. First of all, I'm going to give you a brief overview of all of our funding sources. It's taken quite a few years to bring them all together. The first funding source is $50,000 pledged by the City of Bastrop back in 2005 when we applied for our HUD Hope 6 Main Street grant. The next is the several programs that were initiated by the Recovery and Reinvestment Act and then administered by LHFA, the Louisiana Housing Finance Agency. We secured these funds at the end of last year. That includes $6.4 million of the tax credit exchange equity, which is similar to the low-income housing tax credit, the tax credit assistance program, and home funds. And then also, of course, the $500,000 of the HUD Hope 6 Main Street grant that Bastrop was awarded back in 2005. The remaining funding sources include both federal and state historic tax credits. Those are both about $2 million each, totaling $4 million, and the total project cost and funding is about $13 million. In round numbers, the project cost is $11 million of construction costs, hard costs, including architectural fees and all of those items, and about $2 million of soft costs. The project will be made up of 68 apartments. The apartments will be for persons 55 plus. They'll be similar to the Watchtower Grand Plaza that's in Monroe, another historic rehab. We'll have 2 studio apartments, 62 one-bedrooms, and 2 two-bedrooms. The studios will be about $250. The one-bedrooms will average about $345 a month, and the 2 bedrooms will be up around $500 per month. In addition to the apartments, the project will have some great features, including 4,000 square feet of community space, which we will try to reinvigorate that gym area that a lot of people from Bastrop have fond memories of, and we're retaining part of the stage there, and we'll hopefully be able to host some community events there, and bingo or whatever other types of programming the community needs. There'll also be a computer center, a fitness center, free public Wi-Fi in the common spaces, and we're also going to be a green communities project, which will result in lower energy costs. We hope to be able to install solar panels. It just depends on the funding right now and the total development cost, but that's one thing that we're trying to do. This is a typical one-bedroom layout. You see when you walk in, the existing blackboard will be retained. So we're trying to keep a lot of the historic elements in the building. We're also going to retain and reuse several of the original light fixtures. The project schedule. Like I said earlier, we hope to close in August of this year, which will be the time when we close on the property, which I'm sure the school board will be happy about. We'll also have our groundbreaking and start construction. Once we start construction, we have about a 16-month construction period, which gives us a November 2011 construction completion date, and hopefully the ribbon cutting as well. And then we'll start leasing the apartments in December. Over the years, the city of Bastrop has been an active partner with Woodward Interests in the project. We applied along with the city of Bastrop and the Friends of Main Street for the HUD Hope 6 Main Street grant that brought in $500,000 to the project and to the city. Over the past 5 years, I've worked with Sandra and the rest of the city to administer that money, and we've been able to really put that to good use. As our pre-development funding, it's helped us pay for our architectural fees, environmental fees, our applications for all of the other funding sources, the other $12.5 million. And back in 2005, one of the grant requirements that we wrote in the application was $50,000 of matching funds. At that time, or shortly thereafter, after we were awarded the $500,000, $25,000 was given to the project by the city through I think it was a governor's office grant program. However, the other $25,000 has yet to be committed or yet to be funded to the project. We know that the city of Bastrop doesn't have an excess amount of cash around right now, so we'd like to propose that the additional 25 be given as an in-kind contribution to the project instead of actual check. We request a $25,000 waiver of the building permit fees.
I think that constitutes a legal issue, and that's something that we would have to discuss.
Yes.
Okay. And that's basically the summary of the project. I wanted to leave you with a picture of the building as it was back in, I think this is from 1930. Any questions?
Has your
Excuse me,
construction costs gone up at all, or what?
Yes, from when Tom first started working on the project, I think the total development cost was around $9 million. And then we had the inflation after Katrina of construction costs, and then just the construction cost inflation over time has gone up.
Or would the 13.5 million cover all of this? All of it?
Yes. We just, we brought over our construction documents, Architecture Plus out of Monroe, just finished our construction documents, and Brett Construction is about to do a final pricing of the complete plans, and we expect it to come in at the $11 million cost. We already have a preliminary pricing, but we hope to get more refined figures within the next couple of weeks.
Okay. Do you know what would be the average income to qualify for these apartments?
Well, there are different income levels that, there are 68 apartments. 51 of those will be for persons making, let's see, I think it's 60% of AMI of the area median income or below. And the majority of those 51 are for people at 60%, and then there are about 12 or 14 units for persons at 40 and below.
Okay, thank you.
When you say median, Ms. Oster, do you mean the state average, or would you expound a little bit on that, please?
It's the it's the area median income, so it's the Bastrop community,
Okay.
or the Morehouse Parish community.
Are there any other questions?
If you don't mind, could I add a couple of things that I think
Okay.
are...
If you would go to the microphone out of courtesy to the listening audience, Mr. Cromley.
Just a couple other things that I think are worth mentioning. This issue about the $50,000 from the city, again, as Emily mentioned, those, to get certain dollars over the years, the different programs require different matching. And so if, in fact, the city would not have said, yes, we'll put up these dollars, we know for a fact we would have not gotten the $500,000. I mean, it would have just been precluded. And frankly, it's that $500,000 that has allowed us really to keep nursing the project along long enough that allowed us for the last 3 years to go from the, call it $9 million up to $13 million because of hard cost increases, combined with the fact that we could not get the money all together. Every year the building sits there vacant, we keep increasing the cost to fix it because of further structural damage and water damage, that kind of thing. So we are frankly uncomfortable. The relationship with the project with the city has been just absolutely perfect so far. We hate to ask for anything. We're trying to be 100% self-sufficient, but it's frankly gets down to an accounting thing with all these government programs. We clearly have to do what's called a cost certification, and where there's every invoice has gone through and it's okay, if you said the city's going to put up X, where is it and how do we show it? So it is not our intention to try to not pay the city what's due, if you will. It's a matter of trying to dot our I's and cross the T's, trying to make sure we have secured all 13, just shy of $13.1 million appropriately. To date, the city's only obligation, well, the city's real two obligations had been the commitment of the $50,000, and then the HUD Hope 6 loan was only available nationally to government entities. So there was no way we as a project could go after it. It had to be a municipality, and so the money actually has gone from the federal government to the city of Bastrop into the nuts and bolts, the approved nuts and bolts of the project. And as Emily said, not only former Mayor Hawkins, but now Mayor Olive and Sandra have just been a tremendous help making sure that all happens. It is worthy to note that Bastrop continues to be the only city and thus Morehouse Parish, the only parish to get a Hope 6 Main Street grant. And we could not go back, we tried, we could not go back to get another Hope 6. It's just precluded until this one moves forward. If and when this one moves forward, we think we could be the first Hope 6 Main Street grant project in the country to open. They're all running behind schedule because of piecing together the dollars. So I only bring that up as I'm hopeful that this project will help Bastrop and Morehouse Parish get other dollars in the future if we do what we say we're going to do and it all comes off well. The other thing to mention is that this project has always been envisioned to be a community redevelopment project. We frankly, we're fee developers. Ultimately, this project is owned by an entity we've set up here. Mark Rainwater is the board president of that entity that is set up to actually own the property. That entity shares in the development fee and will own the project in the future. There will be no permanent debt on the property. So we've pieced together, it's taken years, but we've got $13 million with no debt on it. The reason we were able to get our income, the rents down where they are, is there's no debt. So it will be a safe project, a safe entity for the City of Bastrop Development, Inc., which has, the name sounds like City of Bastrop, but there is no obligation of the City of Bastrop government with the project other than the $50,000 and the Hope 6. Everything else is to this, newly formed development entity and all the board members of that entity are local Bastrop people. That entity is set up that if and when they earn their portion of the development fee, they'll reinvest it in the community. If and when the rents, if this property produces cash flow, which it's projected to do, it's not significant, but it should produce $20,000 to $30,000 a year. That money will first go to keep reserves to appropriately manage that asset long-term. If there's additional money, that money will go then and be reinvested in the community by the City of Bastrop Development, Inc. So it is a very, in my opinion, it's a very forward-thinking gadget that you all in Morehouse Parish, City of Bastrop, have going for you that is very widely, positively seen in Baton Rouge with all the funding sources. Emily earlier used the acronym LHFA. It's Louisiana Housing Finance Authority. They are probably the biggest one-stop shop for dollars that get spent, that come from the federal government, get spread around the state. And this project is highly regarded at LHFA, and everybody wants it to happen. So it's really a very positive thing for the city. Last comment on my soapbox is, because of our work here, we've grown to really love being up here, and the community spirit here is good. I would hope and recommend that some of the dollars that this project can generate can go into more and more little planning pieces. I don't mean 100-page volume binder of master planning stuff that sits on a shelf and never gets done, but keep finding ways where you all can keep saying Bastrop is the first in the state to do X and Y and Z and those kind of things, and it'll help get the momentum going for you guys to bring in more money. My last soapbox is, I think you guys need to continue to find a way to proudly state you're the largest agricultural parish in the state, because I think it's one of the best calling cards. A, it's a fact, and B, it's a clear future growth. Louisiana's never going to have big businesses. I live in New Orleans. I'm raising my kids that they got to make their living with their brains. Dell Computer's not moving there, so on and so forth. You guys have a tremendous asset as agriculture. We all always need to eat. All the restaurants in New Orleans are some of the best in the country. They're all looking for fresh vegetables, so on and so forth. So, it's my last soapbox piece, but I think you guys, if you can find a way to keep your heads very high about, hey, yes, we're farmers. We've got that. And not only we're farmers, we're going to be high-tech farmers and find a way to really nurture. You guys are the lead in that, so you might as well keep finding a way to leverage that #1 position in the state. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, thank you for that presentation. Attorney Herring, is there anything that you deem that we need to add or talk about?
No, you and I have talked, and I've looked
Okay.
through it, and the city is basically a conduit for those funds. And we were looking to make sure there was no legal liability on the city, and I'm confident there's not.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Herring. Are there any other questions for our presenters?
Yeah.
Okay, Mr. Armstrong?
Are you planning on using local contractors, especially like the minority groups?
Yes, we are working with, the general contractor will be Brett Construction, but we've talked with them about using local contractors, and we plan on using some minority. We've directed them to use minority businesses wherever possible. It's also one of the requirements of some of our funding sources. So it's on our radar.
On that, because we do a lot of these kind of projects, this is a project that does not have other projects we have has very stated specific DBE, MBE goals and all that. None of the pieces of our financing have that, but we believe it's right. And I hope you don't take this wrong, but we see it as not even minority. How do we, there's $11 million, there's $13 million, there's $11 million of hard costs. Our preference is as much of that to be spent here to generate sales tax, all, the 100 construction workers going to eat lunch every day. I mean, all those kind of ripple effects, so that we don't have any specific obligation, if you will, for certain quotas on that. But BREC knows, and we bring up with BREC is the contractor, that it has to be a sizable contractor, which they are because it's a bonded contract. Architectural Plus has a long history with large renovations, so those are there. The more word that can get out locally that this is happening and call BREC Construction, they're going to put the plans, as of Monday of this week, they will be putting these plans on the statewide database for contractors that'll prompt a lot of calls on, okay, flooring, painting, so on and so forth.
Thank you so much for that presentation. We're looking forward to seeing you frequently.
Thank you. We look forward to inviting you all to the, when we tell you construction started. I'm tired of lying to the mayor that, it's next week. It's next week. It's not. But it's, we feel good about the potential before the end of August to have a simultaneous purchase the property from Morehouse Parish School Board and notice to proceed on the renovation.
Thank you so much. Item number 8, Cindy Haynes, Hills and Zena audit, fiscal year 2008, 2009.
Okay, I want to get that straight before we start. Okay, as the mayor said, we're doing tonight, presenting the audit for the 6/30/09 fiscal year. And just within a few weeks, months, or whatever, we'll get started on the 6/30/2010 audit. But the audit has been submitted to the legislative auditor, any grantors that were requiring a copy of the audit. So as far as future funding or whatever, there should be no problem with that. To start with, and I'm going to keep it as brief as possible, and if there are questions, that won't be a problem. Just some highlights for the year 2009, and like I said, this data is kind of basically 12 months behind us, but at least we know where we're at and what happened. Between 2008 and 2009, our total assets increased about $2 million. Our net assets, which basically is the bottom line, was about the same, $2 million. Revenues increased slightly from 2008 to 2009. Expenditures were down, and the majority of the expenditures were down from 2008 to 2009 because we did probably $2 million, almost $2.5 million worth of street overlay for the fiscal year end 2008 that we did, we didn't do in 2009. So that was what the change there was. The combined ending fund balances for all of the city's funds was $8 million, a slight increase from the previous year. Reserve fund balances, those that are stipulated by bond ordinances, revenue bonding, tax ordinances, whatever, remained about the same from one year to the next. The city did amend their budgets timely for 2008. There was no, according to state law, if there's an unfavorable variance in total revenues or total expenditures for an individual fund of 5% or more, then it is a violation of the state bid law. But the city did amend their budgets appropriately, and there was no unfavorable variance of 5% or more. During 2009 fiscal year, the city's major equipment was for police and fire department. And now the police has the big technology grants that have been going on. There was one for 2004, there was one for 2005 and 2008. At this point in time, we have finished 2004, 2005 and are working hard on 2008 to finish it up. But all of them have been appropriately extended. but '05 was just finished within the last month or so. But like I said, none of the funding was lost. I mean, it seems like a long period of time, but all of it was under the extended time periods. But we have spent literally millions of dollars in the police department on technology equipment. The fire department basically has bought new trucks. They haven't had any, and don't need, you know, major technology, but that's where their needs are. The long-term liabilities that the city has outstanding, the certificates of indebtedness that were incurred for the Walmart project, we still owe about $1 million on those. Capital leases, like I said, we bought some of the fire equipment under those. Pension liabilities, this is for, and this is almost paid off at this point in time, but firemen prior to, Sandra help me, was it 70s? I mean, it's been years ago.
We made our first payment in 81.
Okay.
So it's probably-
Before the state firefighter system, we're still paying for some of those firemen that before they were brought in, if they're still, you know, alive and drawing retirement benefits, we're still having to pay some of those. The sewer revenue bonds, $6 million, about $6.5 million is what we still owe on those. Those are the money that we borrowed. According to DEQ, we had to do the update, so it was really one of those things you had no choice. And then last but not least, about $2 million on the sales tax revenue bonds. That's where we borrowed the money for the street projects. And then I talked some in the report about the June 30, 10 budget, but like we said, that's kind of bygones and whatever. The only big thing, the difference between 09 and 010 as far as the budget, was that we did budget quite a few street projects using that sales tax money that we had accumulated over a period of time. So the money's there. We didn't have to borrow anything or whatever. Like I said, we were accumulating the sales tax and to pay for those as the need be. Okay, on this graph here, I just showed over a period of 4 years, and this is strictly the general fund, how our expenditures have fluctuated. Now, this is not capital. This does not include any capital outlay or any debt service. And you will see basically over the years, very, very little change in the expenditures except in the governmental funds. And here, or the general government, here basically this is because we have grants. Like they were talking about the huge amount of monies that we get for their projects. And that's what spiked it up the last couple of years in 08 and 09. That, we got a lot of Main Street projects, but that's just, you know, basically cash in, cash out. If your expenditures or your revenue increases from grants, then your expenditures, because you have to spend the money. Okay, then we take a look a different way on the pie chart to see where the majority of our expenses are. And you will see that the majority is spent with general government, just administration overall. Just kind of a catch-all for anything that doesn't fit in these other categories. Police is 21% of our expenditures, fire is 22%, streets 7%, sewer 10%, recreation 6%, and then all others, that's cemetery, sanitation, building maintenance, those categories that a lot of expenditures don't incur. Okay, our revenues for 6/30/09 were $12 million, and you can see from this pie chart that the majority of our revenue comes from taxes, which we all knew that. And then here you'll see the intergovernmental. That, again, is our grants, anything from the state, federal, any other governmental entity funding source that we have. Approximately 21% of our money comes from that. And then this just shows the dollar amounts. It's the same pie chart, but just the dollar amounts. You'll see that almost $8.5 million comes from taxes. Intergovernmental for this year was almost, or was a little above 2.5 million. Okay, this chart shows our budget in blue versus the actual cost in red. And you will see in every department that they did a very, very good job. Was especially police and fire was a lot, well, not so much fire, but police was quite a bit less than what they were budgeted. And Sandra, we talked about that. What did we, oh, I know what. Some money had been allocated to hire more personnel or whatever, but because of the local economy or whatever, we just, the Mayor Hawkins, I think, made the decision not to do that at that point in time. Same way with fire. I think that was what we decided, because I was looking at that, and I thought, you know, because most of the time we're real close on our budgets. If we budgeted so much, usually they spend that, but that's why those differences were there. Okay, and then of the $8.5 million that we talked about that's generated from taxes, this is a breakdown of the taxes. We'll see that 58% comes from sales taxes, 37% from ad valorem, and then 5% from gross receipts. That's like your franchise taxes, beer tax, etc. So again, sales tax is the big one. So depending on the future, it may have a big effect there. Okay, I think that may be the last one. So I know that's quick and hurried or whatever, and Sandra has copies of the audit, the full audit report, if anybody's interested in that. It's not that we were trying to keep it from you or whatever, but we basically, you know, with technology, we're just kind of emailing it around. So I've got a hard copy if you want one. Sandra's got a couple, or she definitely has the email, the electronic copy, if any of you want that and are interested in that. You can kind of pick and choose what you want instead of... Does anybody have questions?
Are there any questions for Ms. Haynes? Thank you.
Thank y'all.
That concise report.
And if you do happen to think of something or whatever, feel free to call me.
Thank you, Ms. Haynes. Item number 9. I would like to ask this council to accept the appointment of Councilmember Roy Armstrong as Mayor Pro Tem for this next fiscal year.
So move.
Second.
Properly moved in second. Are there any questions? Discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. Item number 10, Resolution 101340, Investment Policy. Ms. Sandra Goldman.
Good afternoon. The investment policy is a policy that the legislative auditor asks municipalities to come and adopt. It just tells how we do our funding. We don't have a lot of cash, but we do invest it where it does have, it's fully insured, it's safe, it's easy to access. So this tells the procedure that we would go to how we would use our money. And other than paying for debt or putting it in a place that's required from borrowing money, we put it in what we call LAMP. And this is what it says. It's nothing set. We can always amend it, but it's something in writing that says this is what we're going to do. And we've been doing this for years and years and years. We just didn't have it in writing. So by y'all considering this for adoption, it will put us in compliance with the legislative auditor.
You have heard the presentation by Ms. Goldman. At this time, I will entertain a motion.
I make a motion, Mayor.
I second.
Properly moved in second. Are there any questions? Discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Item number 11, Ms. Goldman.
This next is the same thing. The legislative auditor is tasked the municipalities and other government entities to adopt a procedure and policy manual where it would tell what we would do and how we would do it. Then when we have our annual audit, Ms. Haynes will come in, and whatever we say and how we're going to do it, she'll look at this manual and she will be sure that we are doing what we say we're going to do. This is definitely a working project. We started off in the administrative office because I felt like so much has come through there, and this is where it kind of starts at. But we've been tasked before we finish our next year that all departments will have to submit this to us, and we will come back to you and have you adopt an updated policy. But this will keep us in compliance with what we need to do for the legislative auditor.
Okay, you have heard this presentation by Ms. Goldman, and all of these are measures to safeguard our city. I will entertain a motion at this time.
May I make a motion?
Second.
Properly moved in second. Are there any questions? Discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Thank you, Ms. Goldman. Item number 12, discussion action authority for the filing of a lawsuit on behalf of the City of Bastrop and/or for the Historic District Commission against Dixie Cleaners for violation of the Historic District Ordinance. Mr. Lawrence.
Yes, ma'am. Let me see, can I pull the mic up a little bit closer?
Sure.
As all of you know, as all of you know, the Dixie Cleaners is located within the downtown area where the City of Bastrop Historic District Ordinance is applicable. It specifically applies to a number of things that includes the type of signage that may be displayed and used by property owners, business owners, and the like who operate in that area. The fact is, this particular business has a flashing electronic sign that's illuminated, which is under the ordinance not in compliance with the type of signage that may be displayed by a business. Because it is out of compliance, and in light of the fact that there have been some efforts to bring the business back into compliance, I don't know that those efforts have been successful. As a result of that, we are at a point now where we are at the proverbial fork in the road, for lack of a better word, lack of a better term. Either we have to enforce this ordinance or we have to get rid of the law, because all other businesses that are subject to the jurisdiction of this ordinance, they are in compliance. So inasmuch as this body has spoken in the past, you have adopted the ordinance, you have not rescinded the ordinance, you have not gotten rid of it. It is the law of the City of Bastrop. I'm asking or making the request that you grant authorization to the administration and to the city attorney to initiate a lawsuit to enforce this ordinance and to do what needs to be done to bring the business into compliance. And because a lawsuit is an extraordinary act, it is something that we are asking for your permission to do.
At this time, I will entertain a motion on the presentation. You have heard the information. I think all of you have history, as I do, on what Mr. Lawrence has presented to us. I will entertain a motion on this action.
May I make a motion?
Motion by Mr. Johnson.
Second.
Second by Mr. Armstrong. All in favor?
Aye.
Motion carries. Thank you. At this time, I will entertain a motion to expand the agenda.
So moved. Second.
Properly moved in second. All in favor?
Aye.
Mr. McKee, would you address the action we need to take on the Airport Industrial Park hay cutting? And Mr. Lawrence?
Sure.
Okay.
Let me know when you want me to chime in.
Great. I'll give the council a little background, Mayor and Council a little background. Last year, we signed a contract with a company to cut the hay at the airport for X amount of money per round bill and per square bill. That company since went out of business, and we have not had the grass cut this year at the airport, and it's harboring mosquitoes. We're getting complaints, and it's growing up around the runway at the airport. That said, I think it's time for Mr. Lawrence to chime in.
Okay. This is the problem. We put out for bid the contract last year to cut the hay. A component of cutting the hay is harvesting the hay, and the person that cuts it gets to keep it and sell it. Right. If it were just a matter of cutting the hay, no problem, we would not have to bid it. But we're selling hay, essentially. And with the one bidder that we had, who was awarded the contract and who now no longer is willing or able to service the contract, we're in a position where we have to get someone else. The problem is, this is the height of the grass growing season. Also, we have some FAA regulations that we have to remain in compliance with because we're talking about the airport, runway, clear-cut pathways, et cetera, et cetera. So the question is, or the question that Mr. McKee put to me was, can we resort to an emergency provision that will allow the city to award this contract to someone else who is willing and able to go in and to cut the hay, to harvest it, and to pay us by the bale for what they harvest. The point being, we don't have to pay a dime for what's being cut. We, in fact, generate revenue from what's being harvested.
Yes.
That's where we are. We've always done this by an open type of bid process. We got right in the middle of this process, and the person is no longer able to do it. If we were in the wintertime, no problem. We're in the summertime, we have an emergency situation, and so that's what we're looking at. My recommendation when I talked to Mr. McKee was that we ask this body for the authority to be able to award this particular contract to another willing and able provider of this service who is able to not only do the work, but to compensate the city at a rate not less than what we were receiving from the other provider, with it understood that I will check and be sure that what we're doing is permitted.
Okay.
Because we really got into this question deep today, but this is something that we just have to do, and it's not a real option to cut the grass and to just leave it. It's just too much.
Yes.
So.
Okay, I think the circumstances that have been put before us necessitate taking an action immediately, and I'll entertain a motion at this time.
I'll make a motion, Mayor.
Second.
Properly moved and second. Are there any questions? Discussion? All in favor? Any opposed? Motion carries. Thank you, Mr. McKee. Thank you, Mr. Lawrence.
Yes, ma'am.
I want to thank everyone again. Thank you for your presentation, Ms. Haynes. Thank you for your presence. Okay. And again, I want to welcome Attorney Lawrence to the fold for the next 18 months, I believe. You'll be seeing, was it 18 months, that project?
Oh, yes. Was it,
Mr.
were you referring to?
I'm sorry, I was looking at Doug and called Mr.
Yeah, don't curse me that way, Mayor.
We want to officially welcome Mr. Herring to the fold. Thank you so much for adjusting your schedule to be here. At this time, I will entertain a motion to adjourn this meeting.
So move.
Properly moved and second. All in favor? Any opposed? This meeting is adjourned.